Hello, everybody, and welcome to the grand, the glorious, the wonderful, the 50th episode of Back to Basics. We have been going,
What?
when you consider the occasional week we've taken off, we've been going for well over a year now. That is just baffling to me that this has been something we've been able to do for that long. For those of you who are just tuning in on the 50th episode, first off, why? Also, the heck? But that said,
Also, welcome. Come on, dude.
yeah, okay, fair enough. Well done. Congratulations, welcome aboard. Maybe go back to the beginning and pick up from there. I'm not going to judge. But yeah, for those of you joining us, I am Pastor Don, still, for whatever reason, and I am joined by the magnificent, the wonderful, the so awesome. Her brightness is turning the entire world around her. Yellow Courtney.
Our Lady of Mediocre Lighting today, as opposed to Our Lady of Box Wine. I've got cider this time.
Hey, now that's the kind of afternoon we got. I, however, am stuck with a invisible because of my background Suntory lemon squash.
Are they good?
Yeah, they're pretty good actually. Yeah,
Squash.
that's what they call
Anyway.
them. It's basically just like a carbonated lemonade, almost would be the way I would put it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're pretty
Like
good.
lemonade
Like,
Sprite.
yeah, well, not exactly Sprite. Like, it's definitely got like a good sweet lemonade taste to it, but just also got some kick to it. So one thing I love about here in Japan is that there are a million different types of soda that you can just dig into whenever you want. Lots of good options. And then on very rare occasion, I get lucky and the discount store gets a case of Mountain Dew in, and then I'm just a happy camper. Because that is a rare find out here. Anywho, we are going to do something a little bit different for today's episode. And instead of digging into a Bible verse, we've got Genesis 33 on the table for the next episode. We're going to hold off on that for a minute, and we're going to do a little bit of current eventing, which will also involve some historical conversation and talking about something that I honestly think is really important and we don't talk about enough, which is what is and isn't the church. Like, what things are going on in this world that are religion or religion adjacent that you can lay at the feet of Christianity, and what things you can't. Longtime listeners / Discord participants to my regular ranting will have heard me say before about how American evangelicalism specifically is not a part of the Christian church. This is an argument I've been making for many, many years. We'll get into that a little bit. But there are also things that are part of the Christian church which are beyond fucked up, as recent activities in the Southern Baptist Convention have indicated. We'll talk about that too. So the first thing I wanted to do is just kind of throw out the general question to our wonderful non-man, everyman Courtney, to ask you this question. What to you is Christianity in terms of an institution? How would you understand that term?
I'm learning to redefine it right now.
Fair.
By instead of just sort of, I don't know. It's hard to talk about, because like I grew up in the church, but there were lots of great experiences. Including I went to like sleepaway camp at like a Christian overnight camp, and had no bad experiences. Like summer camp experiences, like with other kids and stuff like that, where oh, this one girl in my dorm was terrible or whatever, that kind of thing. But no, I had a lot of really good experiences, but like also I was sort of raised in it. So that's always it's when something's sort of baked into your personality like that, it can be hard to address, I've found.
Right. Well, let me put it to you another way then. One of the big issues in this conversation is, like I said, what constitutes a Christian. In the public sphere, I've heard many people say that if someone says they're a Christian, they're a Christian. I've heard that said in churches.
Yeah.
If you say I'm a Christian, that makes you a Christian. First off, no. And that's the first thing I'm going to throw on there is that no, simply saying I'm a Christian does not work on the individual level. Like, for example, there have been times where, say, Donald Trump has said, "Oh yes, I'm definitely a Christian, the best Christian, the hugest Christian ever." But it doesn't make him
something that is demonstrably untrue from on a
exactly
variety of levels.
right. And what
Like, I'm
practical?
sorry, I'm not generally one to try and judge other people's faith. I'm just a lay person. I'm learning, but no,
Yeah,
absolutely
there
not. In the sense
there
of the word, not
are
in the pretend dress up, go to church way.
yeah
Not that there's anything wrong with going to physical church, but you know what I
no
mean.
no. I mean,
And not in
despite
the
our position
behavioral
as a
way.
partially online church, like we do actually have this physical location too, and we're okay with that. Um, but
There's nothing wrong with that.
no, nothing wrong with that at all. Actually, as weird as it may sound to hear from me, I actually am more in favor of a physical church than an online church. I would rather we could all be in the same place, but life. But that said, um, there are demonstrable criteria of what constitutes a Christian. To say I am Christian and then behave and act in ways that are demonstrably anti-Christian, do not respond to accountability, do not allow yourself to be held accountable for your behavior in an individual, we can spot that immediately. We look at our Trumps and our Jeff Sessions and I could just list people in the Trump organization for that matter, who claim themselves to be Christian and then immediately go out and do absolutely everything unchristian they can think of. Don't go to church, don't pray, don't even seem to know their Bible. Like, they're claiming that name specifically for a political purpose. That's something we would call a liar or a not Christian. That's like, whatever you are, we're not poo-pooing the fact that you may have faith in something, but we're just saying you're not what you say you are. Like, we as individuals don't necessarily have a problem identifying that in other individuals. My question is, how do we then apply that to organizations, denominations, as you might call them, which again, we'll get into that in a minute, but like, to have
I feel
actual...
like the definition of Christian should be.
Mhm.
I mean, it should be, but is just someone who follows the teachings of Jesus Christ and accepts them as savior.
Yeah, that
Is that about it?
that is interestingly enough part of the definition. But again, it depends on whether you're talking about as an individual or as a group. Now, what are we talking about, an individual's faith, or are we talking about an individual's religious identity? Now, these are actually two different things. And this is something I want to caution people to be aware of when we're talking about what is and isn't Christian, because talking about the ephemeral nature of someone's personal walk with God is by definition something we can't know about. I can't know how you and God are doing in a relationship. I'm not privy to that detail. And so being unable to comment on that is one thing, but also being able to comment on whether someone is actually doing the things they claim to do, or whether they're part of the institution or the religion of Christianity, is a different thing. I believe in Christ is a different statement from I am a Christian. And I think that's a key distinction we should make here. Are you following me so far?
Yeah. You got something specific you're getting at.
I always do, but I love to bat it around. I'm like a little cat with theology. It's fun. Like, it's got catnip.
Yeah, I'm not your catnip mouse though. So like, what are you getting at?
What I'm getting at is that we're awash in a world full of organizations that fundamentally aren't Christian. Like, we have whole groups and organizations and things that are calling themselves part of the Christian church that aren't. So, to give a little background history for our viewers, because this is going to require me to rant for a minute, so I apologize. Feel free to like chuck a pineapple at my face or something in our back to basics parlance if you want me to shut up and explain something. For those of you who don't know the history of American evangelical Christianity, I'm going to kind of boil it down to you in a very quick thing. We have gone over this in Back to Basics. We've gone over this in Get Thee Behind Me. We've gone over this in a couple of different places. The long and short of it is
we gonna talk about Schofield for a minute? Is that...
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. Like, you can't talk about identifying the cults that are being mistaken for Christianity without talking about good old C.I. Scofield and his bullshit. So basically, there have always been extremist, weird outlier cults that have been Christian adjacent for the longest time. And the church as a whole has taken one look at their nonsense and said, yeah, that's not us. Like, get out. You want to keep doing whatever weird nonsense that is, you do it, but you're not part of us in doing it. Like, that's too much. And it goes back to like some of the original Roman era sex cults that were like, we're also Christian. And the church was like, no, you're not. And that goes all the way forward. There have been periodically, like the Gnostics were a good example of this. Like, this is something that has historically happened around every religion. Christianity is no different. Going into what we could call the American era, so from kind of the Puritan period on out, there was an outlier group of Puritans who were themselves an outlier group that were all about the end of the world. And they stayed an outlier group because the most of the church, the Protestants in America, the Protestants back in Europe, were all like, yeah, no, like, we're not end times obsessed. We're not doing all this weird numerology stuff. Like, that's not what we do. Flash forward, we get to C.I. Scofield in the 1800s, who's like, I'm going to write a Bible based on all of these legitimate heresies that I, for some reason, believe, gets it published through Sears, and gives a huge kick in the backside to all of these people who are like, oh, wow, I want to believe in this end times mania. I want to believe in hatred of gay people, which was not in the Bible before about the 1700s. All of this stuff kind of wrapped up in one neat package. Flash forward even farther, and we get the declining Republican Party that's like, oh, we need to get people to vote for us, even though it's wildly against their interests. What if we claim that it's an article of faith? And they grabbed this kind of Scofieldist heretical group, banded together with some of its leading experts, like your Pat Robertsons, etc., who, see you later, dude. Got together with all those guys and said, okay, you're Christianity now, and we're going to publicize the hell out of it. And over time, that gives birth to what's now known as the evangelical or non-denominational church movement. It's something we kicked out that the politicians got a hold of and said, we can get use out of this. It is fundamentally not a part of the Christian church, which, by the way, for those of you who are fans of language, the term non-denominational should have probably been a big indicator, because that means not a part of the larger church. But, so that's how we get to this point historically. So, yeah, a little bit insane, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, a little bit infuriating too.
Yeah, which is like, those of you who've interacted with either of us on our Discord server, like, you've probably seen me at some point drop the whole Janet from The Good Place, not a church or not a pastor meme in response to some article or another that says, Christian pastor says we can go to heaven by, I don't know, burning unbelievers or something ridiculous like that. And it's almost invariably some weird cultist who's doing this stuff and not a part of the Christian church. Like, God, that happens all the time.
Do you think they're afraid that after, like, people of different sexualities and gender identities and such are treated as people, they're going to just run out of people to treat as lesser than?
I imagine
Is
so.
that...
Let's not forget that the whole thing is built around a political ideology and not like any actual religious teaching that's Christian or Christian adjacent. Like,
yeah, no, they picked it up out of convenience.
It's exactly. It's Scofieldism with hints of Pentecostalism worked in with all of the snake oil salesmen and street preachers you could find. Pat Robertson was a fucking charlatan and made into a massive kingmaker within American politics because of it. You okay?
Bless us that his assemblage of molecules can't do any more damage.
And that's a fair position to have here. Is like,
just
so much damage. But it wasn't just
him. I'm like diet queer, but still, like, the joke for years has been pride is canceled, it's time for wrath. And no, pride is canceled, it's time for wrath.
No, that's fair. And the thing is like, for anybody still listening at this point, all of this Pat Robertson nonsense, the hatred of the gays, the dismissal of women, which we'll get into that as it relates to the actual church in a minute, almost all of this is cultic nonsense that isn't from the Christian faith, but more is the point, it's wrong. Like, we don't believe that. Jesus didn't believe that. It wasn't even in the Bible. So, like, I really, really want to stress that point out. So we've gotten to the point now where we have this evangelical, non-denominational political mush that is being put forward as the real Christianity. It's like New Coke, but for Christian religion, I guess. To make a suitably 80s reference.
Because New Coke was so great.
Yeah, right. Like, so that's going on, and that's a thing. But the thing is because it's being pushed out so strongly by the Republicans and their political and media arm, it doesn't stay to itself. It gets into people. People start thinking and believing the things that they're told by their culture. And what the culture has been saying for so long is Christianity is hateful. Christianity hates the gays. Christianity hates women. Christianity is all about two issues, abortion and the gays, and fuck them both. Like, that's been put out there time and time and time again, to the point where it's gone back into the church and started to almost infect it in places. And you see groups that previously may not have even had an issue with some of this stuff starting to go backwards on these issues.
Yeah. I think it's really because so much of our church experience I don't know. I feel like if you make something out to be mainline Christianity, it's going to become associated with mainline Christianity. Right. If it's got enough publicity behind it, like.
And that's been the real kicker.
It's very depressing. Sorry, I find the whole thing very depressing today.
No, it is worth acknowledging that this is a thing that's depressing, and it's extremely frustrating for me as a mainline progressive Christian to have watched my entire life as forces outside of the church have A, convinced the world, and then B, started convincing the church that we're this hateful monstrosity. Like, it is extremely frustrating because that's not who Jesus is. It never was. And so a lot of this evangelical crap can get laid at the foot of Republicans, politicians, and wealthy folk who have decided to take advantage of that for their own benefit. But there is a flip side to that, which is what exactly are we culpable for? Because one of the big things that gets thrown around here is, oh, you're just making a no true Scotsman argument. Like, nobody's Christian.
Yes, I was waiting for that to come up.
Yeah, which one isn't the case. A no true Scotsman argument is based on the idea of arguing over an indefinable. In the case of that particular argument, what actually constitutes a Scotsman, this ephemeral mental aspect of what it is to be. It doesn't work that way. Christianity has definable attributes to it. One of the best examples I've ever heard of this given, and I am going to paraphrase because I don't have it committed to memory, is attributable to the venerable, the wise, and the wonderful C.S. Lewis, who in his intro, I think it was in his intro to Mere Christianity, is describing the development of the term gentleman. And, you know, older writer, of course, is going to be something that's more contemporary to him. And he talks about how initially the term gentleman specifically meant a member of the landed gentry who owned property and was part of this particular class. It wasn't an insult to say someone was or wasn't a gentleman. It was simply just a statement of fact, like, you are from Michigan, or you are, you know, living in Japan. Like, you're a gentleman. You have these particular attributes. And over time, people started using the term to establish a moral or an internal dimension. It stopped being verifiable and started being ephemeral, at which point it became an insult to say that someone is not a gentleman, and the term thereby lost any functional relativistic meaning. And in the same way, there was a turn.
Words mean things, but those meanings change over time.
Yeah. And this is
basic etymology.
Yeah. And this is where it gets problematic, is for a term like gentleman that has no real world consequences, mostly because the system of landed gentry that it's assigned to doesn't exist anymore. And it didn't even at the time they were using it. It was a kind of a holdover. But now we have, in the past, say, 100, 150 years, we've seen the exact same function be applied to the term Christian. For most of the lifespan of that term, it has been someone who is a member of the Christian church, who is in good standing, verified part of the accountability system of the larger church, and has dedicated themselves to the following of the teachings of Jesus Christ and the serving of the greater organization of Christ here on earth. Like, that's what the term meant. It wasn't an insult to say that someone isn't a Christian. It's just, you're part of a different group or no group at all. That's just who you are. But over time, particularly
Maybe
as
you even worship the same God I do in similar ways, but you're just not a member of this church.
Yeah.
Basically,
and
right?
We can also talk about like what does and doesn't constitute a church, because like, for the example I always use is that I'm an ordained minister of the Reformed Church in America. My ordination was given to me by the president of our classis, who was in turn ordained by someone else. That whole ordination in the Reformed Church of America can all be traced all the way back to the very first person who was ordained in the RCA, who was ordained in good standing by someone in good standing of the Dutch Reformed Church. And while there may have been a separation there, everybody was all in good standing when all of this happened. Like, there's no question of the ordinal status there. And you can trace that all the way back to Martin Luther. You can trace that all the way back into the Catholic Church. You can trace that all the way back to the popes if you want to. And the same goes with anyone who's a member of a denomination. Is you're part of this group that we may have many branches, lots and lots of branches, and we could go on for days about how denominations work. But there are branches. Like, it's part of a thing. And you can trace that connection all the way back to the root, which is Jesus Christ, his own self. Now, pair that with what I just explained about evangelicalism, which didn't come from us. It was things that we had said, nope, that's not us. You can believe whatever you want, but you're not part of the church. You are not a branch of the church. You're not anything of it. And then that twig lying on the ground and about 10 other twigs were bound together in a bundle by somebody with ill intention and then planted 6 miles away, and is now trying to say it's the same tree. Like, no, it may have borrowed certain elements from it at times, but like, it's not, it does not maintain that connection. The people who do it were not ordained by anybody in the church. The people who are members of it were not given their memberships by people who were part of any existing connected church. It's just not a thing. It's not there.
I feel like one of these days we're going to have you debate. We're going to have to find some well-intentioned, I'm realizing how difficult this is going to be as we go along. Find some well-intentioned, like, evangelical preacher to debate you.
Yeah, that would be a hell of a thing, honestly. And I'd be game for it. But as you may have guessed, those sorts of people don't generally tend to talk to me. But the end result of all of that, though, is we get things like Bethel Church in Redding, California. Are you familiar with that one?
I've heard the name bandied about, but I don't actually know anything about them.
These are the people who, like, they have a whole bunch of sex culty stuff in them, and they practice things like grave soaking, where they lay on the graves of the dead and stuff like that. Like, really ridiculously weird shit. And they say, well, it's a Christian church. It's a great big Christian church. No, it's not. None of the things you're doing are Christian. None of the ways you're acting or believing are Christian. You've just taken that name and are using it for political expediency. I sense the weight of the world rolling their eyes at me.
It just... words do still mean things.
Right. So anyway, the flip side to that is, what about the Southern Baptist Convention? That's going to be the other half of this question. Are you familiar with those guys?
I have been too busy with my own life to have heard what's going on, and I know I'm going to be horrified, so you might as well lay it on me. All
right. Well, allow me to preface this by saying this may well be the only time in history where you found yourself agreeing with Rick Warren. So that right there is something mind-blowing. But Rick Warren and his Saddleback Church, as well as a couple of others that are honestly basically evangelical churches on their own, have actually still maintained membership in the Southern Baptist Convention. So they've been part of the right-wingest right-wing sect of the Christian tree for a very long time. And their theology has been pushing well out beyond that, and they've been saying some pretty twisted things. The prosperity gospel has its roots very much in this branch of the tree. But it is still a branch. It is part of us in the broadest possible sense of the term. They got kicked out of the SBC. So they did, and a couple of other, and I see you're giggling and you're like, yes, they did something good. No, they did not. They did not. I'm with Rick Warren on the fact that this should not have happened. And do you know why?
No, why?
The reason the SBC kicked them out had nothing to do with their evangelical and evangelical adjacent bullshit. It had to do with the fact that they decided they were going to ordain women. I am dead serious. For the first time ever, Rick Warren's on the right side of the history, and this branch of the church told him to fuck straight off. That is my exact response to that. You need a drink for that one.
I don't want to be on this planet right now.
Right? Right. Now, for all of my ranting about how evangelicalism is not a part of Christianity, this is a fuck up you can lay at the foot of Christianity. We screwed that one up. Like the SBC.
Well, I mean, and that's a like weird topical one to point to, but I do think it's really important that we address like the massive amount of problems that the church proper has and has caused.
Oh,
and
absolutely. Like our uncomfortable association with power and with masculinity and with patriarchy over the years has led to some phenomenally bad decisions, dating back all the way to things like the elimination of the earliest disciples, who were mostly women. Like they get quietly struck from the history books. Like Christianity began as an egalitarian thing, and almost immediately Peter and his folk are like, oh, we can't have vaginas in our midst. We got to do something about that. Like this is misogyny and stupid assholery has been a part of our faith for a long time, and the pushback against that has been our holy and righteous duty. So recognizing that, you know, this BS in the SBC, that's a lot of acronyms for one sentence, that is on our plate. Like that is a continuation of some bullshit that dates all the way back to Peter.
all right, I gotta play your devil's advocate for a minute.
Okay, I'm loving that.
If Christianity has historically been practiced in such an assholic manner, just over the, I mean, the low-hanging fruit to bring up is the Crusades.
Yeah.
But like that was all the church proper. Like if historically it's been practiced like this, does that not make it what Christianity is?
Good question. And it's one we continue to wrestle with. One of the things that I like to point out is that these things that happened didn't happen in a vacuum. They were wrong, but they happened within systems that were meant to prevent it from happening. They're failures of the systems, but there was still that push and pull of accountability. There was still an institution with voices in it that were fighting back against it and voices that were fighting for it. Now, we know historically, whether you're talking about Christianity, whether you're talking about world governments, there are always going to be times where the stupidity outweighs the voices of our better natures, and institutions make bad decisions. Christianity is no exception to that. Our biggest and baddest decision was to become an institution of that scale in the first place by allying with Constantine. Like, we have made bad choices, but they were choices that were made institutionally with people fighting for both sides. There's a system at play.
Where have we made good choices? The church.
Any of the liberation efforts in South America are a good example. Toyohiko Kagawa's co-op movement in Japan, any of the Christian movements, the Jesuits that were their work against the Holocaust, pretty much any part of the Benedictines working throughout the Middle and Dark Ages, where they were feeding people and keeping people alive in a time where plague and other things were destroying things. There is a long and storied history of Christianity doing good just for the sake of doing good, because it's the right thing to do. but there's also evidence of the latter as well. And the latter sells more books. I'll be honest about it. Like, we don't hear about Gustavo Gutierrez nearly as much as we hear about, pretty much any pope or the Crusades where terrible things have been done. Now, yeah, that like there has been both of those things at play, and this is.
I just feel it's an important angle to come at this from, because I think that's probably where a lot of people are at, and it's where I find myself sitting sometimes, where I'm like, God damn, like,
and for what it's worth,
if
I'm
it
a
quacks
pastor
like a duck.
Yeah, like I'm a pastor, and I find myself sitting there from time to time. Like that's an okay place to be, to look at my religion and say, what the fuck, guys? Like, that is an absolutely necessary part to be. Now, I think anyone who's known me for any length of time knows I am many things, but a hardcore institutionalist is not one of them. But I do also recognize the utility of operating in groups and working as a team and having an institutional structure to do good on a greater scale. The problem that we run into, though, and this is something that, whether you call them the progressives or the good Christians or the mainline or the core, whatever you want to call it, this part of the Christian church that has tried to stay as close to the teachings of Jesus as possible, we're not the most confrontational bunch typically. Like, the people who want to be confrontational are also typically the ones who want to be conservative. There's a significant overlap in personality traits. Whether you could say confrontationalism breeds conservatism or conservatism breeds confrontationalism, I couldn't begin to tell you the psychology of it, but I can tell you there is a huge overlap there. I am, to the best of my knowledge, one of the very few progressives who doesn't mind telling people to shut all of the way the fuck up. That is a not common approach amongst our kind. And so you wind up.
Oh, this is why you got me involved then, because I'm mouthy.
Yes, we need more mouthy progressives, damn it. But that's really been it, is like, we talk about the voices of our better natures being shouted down historically. That's a lot of what that is. Like, and the problem is every bad decision you make in an institution perpetuates. So you make a decision that women don't get to have a voice. Well, how are you ever going to make a decision that women do get to have a voice if there's no women making that decision? It's got to be men speaking up to change that system, or to leave that system and see it broken. Now, there is a really, really important debate happening within Christianity right now as to whether, do we put out the fire or do we let the house burn down and build a new one? Like, is Christianity repairable in any functional way? Or do we need to rediscover what this institution ought to be? What do you think about that question?
I think it's a fascinating one, especially because, again, as the meaning of words change over time, like, if people are used to very understandably associating a great amount of, like, abuse and atrocity with the Christian church, like you said, historically, like, you stretch all the way back and it's just unfair, ridiculous, power grabby nonsense. Not exclusively, but consistently. Yeah. Granted, everything is like that, though. At that point, you can go on the same kind of tangent and be like, okay, well, any country that gets into a sufficiently like, uncomfortably, what's the word I'm looking for, like, unstable or disagreeable spot needs to be, wiped clean and started over. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. This is where I live.
There's a very strong argument based out of the simple fact that power corrupts, that religion is important, and that religion is vital to our spiritual and personal development. But, and I say this as a religious leader, religions and the leaders of them should not have the kind of social or governmental or institutional power that they've been vested in for centuries. Like, that's too much unchecked power to be had. Now, when we talk about institutions, as I said, I'm not much of an institutionalist, but I do recognize as well the importance of having accountability. And if you put too much power in one place, who's going to hold it accountable? You have a religious leader that can basically do whatever the fuck he wants. He's probably going to wind up doing some shady shit because no one's looking after him.
The other reason you brought me in on this, to keep your ass in check.
Exactly. Like, I mean, y'all know I should not be trusted to have too much power. Nobody should. But like, can you imagine what would happen if I were trusted with too much power? We would never stop talking about Star Trek. It would just be that forever.
The entire cult is wearing mandatory Starfleet uniforms.
Look, I'm not going to say I chose to be a pastor because clergy collars look an awful lot like Starfleet uniforms, but I'm not saying that.
You're despicable.
I am what I am.
Jam that jam.
Yep. So,
all right. So what else? What else do we need to talk about? We've
covered the full spectrum of this whole issue here, and this is still technically a back to basics episode, but I really wanted us to take a minute and pause and realize that we're not just archaeologicaling our way through the Bible here. Like, we're not just talking about this ancient text from oh, look how interesting this is. Like, there is a real and active faith at play here, and there are real actual issues that it connects to. And the faith that this whole Bible has been a part of has done good and bad throughout the years. And it's also been taken out of our hands, and has had bad done to us as well. I, for one, have been pushing back against evangelicalism within my denomination since I was old enough to remember. I remember having these arguments with my pastors when I was barely any younger than my current children are. Like, I remember being my son's age and like getting into a screaming match with a Sunday school teacher who was trying to tell us that we need to hate gay people. And I'm like, no, that's not a thing. Show me where it is in the damn book. Like, that we need to be doing that. We need to never stop doing that, and recognizing that the traditions we're talking about exist within this absolute modern need to speak up, I think, is stupidly important. You have anything to add, or do you want to just let me rant for a minute? Like, I'm good at ranting. Like, that's kind of pretty much my whole deal. But like, you got anything more you want to throw on that?
I just kind of want to put out there the importance of if I'm not incorrect, please correct me if I'm wrong. Stance of unfinished, that like, we're not the only way to get where you're going. Yeah. Like,
there's a lot of people heading that way, and if you think that way is the way you want to go, we'd love to have you hop in the back with us. But you got to go a different way. You got to go a different way. Like, I'm going to judge you for your destination.
But and to keep the analogy going, if you've had some really bad experiences with hitchhiking in general and just don't wish to engage in that again, cool.
Yeah. We're not going to pick you up by the scruff of your neck along the side of the road and chuck you in the back of the truck. That's not a thing we do.
And it just, I mean, like, again, I keep joking, oh, happy Pride, but like, a lot of people have been really hurt by the church over time. And if there's not anything that we can do to, make that better for you, that's valid. Like, I just feel like that kind of thing is important to throw in occasionally, just coming from your local angry queer. Like, it just pisses me off so bad.
Yeah, if you're a member of the LGBTQIA community and you are just too pissed at the church to interact with it, I get it. I really get it. I don't blame you.
That's basically what I'm getting at.
In the slightest. Like, that is a legitimate and understandable place to be. If you're not ready to hear any of us pointing out that, like, a lot of that didn't come from the church, I get it. If if that feels like something that fills you with anger, I get that too. Like, and if
Mhm.
I'm pointing to things that the church absolutely did, and you want to hear more about us taking responsibility for that, let me know. I will be happy to grovel. We've definitely fucked up some stuff. We're on the hook for that. That's fair too. Like, it's
You could do a
okay.
whole mini series, just a whole series in general, like sins of the church,
Yes.
and just run them down and be like, okay, this was
Yeah,
wrong.
we're,
This
we're
shouldn't have
starting a new
happened.
series
And
here
this.
called we're starting a new series here called Things Pastor Don is Sorry For, and it's just 30 minutes every week of me reading a list of the things the church has done that I'm apologizing for. Like, we could make another mini series about that. And that's fair to acknowledge. Like, that, yeah, the church has done some shit too. And
I feel like
recognize
for me anyway. Sorry, for me anyway, acknowledging that stuff actually kind of like opens the door and makes me feel like I can interact and reevaluate my faith from the ground up, like I've been
yeah.
working on doing for a long time now.
Mhm.
Um, more than just 50 episodes.
Yeah.
Dig around on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, I
Please
know.
don't.
We've been
But
at
do
this
if
for
you
a
think
minute.
it'll help.
But yeah, like, both of these things need to be held in tension. Like, the fact that the church has profoundly fucked some things up over its 2,000 years life cycle. And at the same time, that some of the things that are happening now aren't coming from the church. Both of these things have to be held in tension and recognized for what they are. Um, a line that always comes back to me from the first Captain America movie, right at the beginning of the movie, is the German scientist pointing out to the soon to be Captain America, everyone forgets the first country the Nazis conquered was their own. The same could honestly be said of evangelicals and their work in American Christianity right now. I mean, the American Christian church has been largely dominated by this cultural and political force that is evangelicalism. And well, there is quite a lot that can be hung on the church historically, in the same way that, like, in our analogy, Germany still had World War I and all that other stuff that could be hung around their neck. Like, they definitely did those things. We're also fighting our own brand of Nazism right now, and we're trying. And there are as many Bonhoeffers as there are Hitlers within the Christian church right now. And if you've been up to your neck in Hitlers, I get it. I really do. As a mental image.
Is that going to be the title of the episode?
Up to our neck in
neck in
Hitlers.
Hitlers.
Yes, that is the title. I'm sticking with it.
No, we'll get kicked off YouTube.
Hey, getting kicked off for preaching the word, I'll take it. But no, but seriously, if you are up to your neck in Hitlers, as it were, there are as many Bonhoeffers out there that are trying their damnedest to fight off the infection of this evangelical parasite. And whether you're on board with that fight or not, or whether you have just completely walked away from it, I understand both and love you just as much either way.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good place for us to end for today. I think we've got a good 50th episode. It's depressing, it's annoying, but guess what? So is the journey of faith. Next week, this will lead us actually really well into our next week's episode. Next week, we're going to get back to the Bible again, as is our Ken. And we'll be talking about Genesis chapter 33, which is where Jacob and Esau are reconciling and coming back together, which is kind of the thing we want to be talking about. So, yay! Good news is coming, I guess. Woohoo! But also keep an eye out for a bunch of other things we got coming up. Our unfinished community pride video will, if I get off my ass and edit the thing appropriately, be out probably sometime next week, or this week actually, by the time the episode drops. So keep an eye out for that. That's coming out pretty soon. And if you have issues about the editing quality about that, you can join our Discord server and yell at me directly. That's something I would encourage.
Maybe even volunteer to edit our videos for us.
That would be a wonderful idea. That would give me a lot more time for, like,
we could use a video editor.
Yeah,
we could use a video editor, seriously.
So in any case, most importantly, stay tuned, keep an eye out for yourself, and I'm thinking about you and I'm praying for you this week, whatever you're going through, and I hope you have a good one. Take care, and we will see you on the next episode, where I promise you we will get back to the Bible. Bye, everybody.
Peace out. Bye.